As part of any hydrobiology class in Minnesota, it makes sense to, in my mind, know a little bit about some of the fish of our great state. So I did include in the notes packet some of the different Minnesota fish families. And so if you want to consult your notes packet as we go through this little review, or if it's the first time you've seen it, little preview, then by all means do so. For identifying fish, you can tell it's a fish, but what kind of fish? Well, again, like insects and flowers and birds and trees, we use morphology to try to figure out what species are. So to be helpful in identifying fish, it's helpful to know the anatomy of fish. If you're using a field guide of sorts or a key to identify fish, then knowing the language of what fish are made of, what the key features of them are, is beneficial. So we're going to name that fish part. So the first one is this thing right here, I believe. And you probably know that underneath here are the things that help fish breathe, called gills. And bony fish, which most of the fish that are in Minnesota lakes are, have a cover over the gills, and it has a name. It's called the operculum. So the operculum shape and placement on a fish can vary from species to species. Then most of what we're looking for are the different fins and how they're placed and how they're structured. So the one on the back side of a fish, just like in Jaws, the shark fin that sticks out of the water, that's called the dorsal fin. Dorsal fin. And in some fish, the dorsal fin has two parts. This part here is bony and this is soft. So if you were to poke your finger on this, you'd get stabbed, maybe start bleeding. And here the fin would move at the touch of your finger, or bend. It could be more flimsy. So we have the spiny dorsal fin and the soft dorsal fin section. So not all fish will have the two sections, but some do, and it can help you identify it. Then back here we have a fin that a lot of people would just call the tail fin. It has a special name called the caudal fin. This is pointing to a row of scales that go along the side, and the side, another word for side, is lateral. So like in football, when you pitch the football sideways, they call that a lateral. So the lateral line is a set of sensitive cells that the fish has for noting different changes in pressure, electrochemistry in the water next to it. So it can actually respond with a reflex as another fish might be swimming next to it. So when you see fish in schools all turning and swimming together, it's because their lateral line is sensing a pressure change as one fish moves next to them. It causes the pressure in the water to trigger something in their lateral line cells, and then they can respond almost in unison. The lateral line on some fish actually has a distinct coloration or distinct looking scales, and so you can identify fish using or referring to the lateral line. We've got another fin down here, and it is named based on its proximity to where the fish goes to the bathroom. So that's the anal fin, because right in front of the anal fin is the anus where it poops. If you've ever had fish in an aquarium, you probably seen the poop coming out of the fish. And that would always be the location. Some fish, the scales on them are too small to be seen. Some, the scales are noticeable, and how many rows of scales they have can be something that you would pay attention to for identifying a fish. Then we have a set of fins down here called the pelvic fins, and another set of fins called the pectoral fins. So on some fish, the pectoral fins are further down, a lot closer to the belly. Some of them they're more up on the side. So it depends on the species, but just like in us, the pectoral muscles of you are closer to your head than your pelvis. Pelvis would be your hips. So pelvic fins always further back or further below than pectoral fins. So there's some basic fish anatomy. We will point out another couple things on some of the others that pop up in Minnesota fish families. So name that fish family. Again, consult your notes if you have them handy. So here we've got very long, elongated fish, and the dorsal fin is very far back along its back, and it's almost lined up with the anal fin below. Almost looks symmetrical. Very long jaw. And so this would be the pike family. The fancy Latin name for the pike family is Isaacidae. No, you won't have to memorize that. How about this one? Same family, pike family. Or this one? Yeah. So northern pickerel, muskie. It can be tricky, but the fish regulation booklets do have pictures and descriptions to help you identify. For example, the muskie has pointier tail fins, and the northern more rounded. And you can actually count the pores on the bottom of their jawline to determine if there's, I believe, 6 or more, it's a muskie. If it's 5 or fewer, it's a northern. But what's tricky about some of these species is they hybridize. They can crossbreed, and so sometimes the coloration can be deceptive as a identifying mark. You might say, oh, that's a bullhead, and the bullhead would be the catfish family. And the bullhead has 2 features that a lot of the fish don't, but are kind of interesting morphologically. So this is a fin, but it doesn't have any spine through it. And so this fin is just holding fat. So it's basically a nubbin of skin and fat. It's called an adipose fin, and adipose in Spanish, I believe, means fat. And then these things here, you'd call them whiskers, but they're technically called barbels. B-A-R-B-E-L-S, barbels. And these barbels help them sense for food in murky waters. So basically it's an extension of its smell capacity of their nostrils, only on the exterior. And so their sense of smell or taste is part of these barbels. So the catfish family typically do have barbels and typically do have that adipose fin. You might recognize this as a carp. And carp, they're what you'll notice about the carp and other minnows is that their dorsal fin, it typically doesn't have that really spiny section and then a softer section. oftentimes just one section shows up on the minnow family. But carp are in the minnow family. And so what's worth noting with the minnow family is we think of them as little, but not all minnows are small. We use them as bait when they are small, but some of them grow to be rather large. Another family of fish in Minnesota. So this is a trout, and trout would be in the salmon family. And they don't have barbels, but they do have an adipose fin. And so if you see a fish, it's kind of torpedo-like, doesn't have the two-part dorsal fin, doesn't have barbels, but it does have an adipose fin. So you're looking at the salmon family. Here's a whitefish, and similar to the trout. No barbels, a small dorsal fin, and an adipose fin. Here's another minnow. How about this group? Where would that fit? Hopefully, well, maybe some of you recognize that as a crappie. Where would crappie fit in? Maybe in the sunfish family, Centrarchidae. So what you notice about their dorsal fin is they have a spiny portion and a soft portion, but it's not separated. You would feel the separation in the two parts if you were to put your finger here versus here, but you don't see a very noticeable separation between the two parts. You'll also notice that their anal fin is larger than most and extends in, again, creating some symmetry here with the dorsal fin. Here's another one in the sunfish family. Recognize a bass. And here you do have more of a clear separation, but they are still connected, the two-part dorsal fin. Again, the pectoral fin up along the side on the panfish, whereas you notice that the pectoral fin on the northern was down near its belly. And another family. Now here you've got the two-part dorsal fin, but they are separated. That's typical of the perch family. And another member of the perch family. You might recognize this as our state fish, the walleye. So just some examples of some Minnesota fish and some Minnesota fish families and some of the characteristics to help you identify them. So hopefully this helps some of you that aren't that familiar with fish.